Started. Okay, so welcome and Happy New Year. Welcome to the first talk for the year where I want to address what is on everybody's mind, which is weight loss in the new year. And first I'll do a little introductory stuff, tell you a little bit about last year, where things are at in the state of functional medicine, where things are at in life in general, the Kalish Institute. A lot of exciting things have happened that you should know about. So one thing that was very exciting that happened yesterday was we launched a new website, and here it is in all its beauty, Everything Functional Medicine, Kalish Institute of Functional Medicine. So we have all kinds of great classes that we've been working on for a couple years now. We have our mentorship, which I do, the one-year program. I created with a group of business consultants a fundamentals class in practice management for doctors that are interested in that. We have a brand new class that we completed just recently on the fundamentals of functional medicine, which is really pretty exciting. I've never done that before. The fundamentals course on functional medicine is really just like the basics of clinical nutrition and how you approach this work. And then we have a series of master classes we're going to be coming out with throughout the year. So anyways, new look, new year for us at the Kalish Institute, and I'm excited to be involved in all that work. And then there's all kinds of crazy things happening in my personal life. My son has decided that he's going to go to college, which means I think he's going to leave. So anyways, I bought a new car. Actually, it's not a new car, but new to me. 1971 Alfa Romeo. There's my son taking it out for a spin a couple months ago. Going to be sad to see him go away to college. So it's his last year of high school, and he and I are enjoying the vintage car thing and having some fun with that. And then just so you can see what the heck I'm up to, this is Dan Kalish, circa 1979. There I am right there in all of our glory at Berkeley High School in the 70s. Can you believe that? And these are my best friends. We've known each other since we were 12 years old. This was us going through high school together. And I had a New Year's Eve party last week, and I was looking at the party list, and I realized, oh my gosh, every one of those guys is going to be at the party. And it was a miracle because Jeff, 40 years later, lives in Africa. Sean lives on the coast of Oregon. Lauren's a professor at the University of Iowa. Bjorn and I are still here in the Bay Area. But anyways, the five of us got back together New Year's Day. There's the picture from high school. Still hanging out, still being boys together, and well, appreciating the family and friends in the new year. All right. We could do a bunch more pictures, but I'm going to jump into the topic now. We got probably most of the people who are going to be listening are in the room, and let's jump in and look at this. And I took some notes because this is something that I confront every day in my practice. As you guys will know, everyone is worried about losing weight. And last year, 2016, I had the privilege to travel quite a bit and go to a lot of different seminars. And there were three doctors out of the dozens and dozens that I heard speak that really kind of stand out in my mind in regards to what we're going to talk about tonight. And these three doctors, each of them has 40 plus years of clinical experience, meaning between the three of them, there's like over 120 years of research and patient treatment experience. And I want to share their messages with you tonight and kind of reinforce the work that I learn as I go around to these seminars that you guys maybe don't have the chance to attend. So number one, Dr. Walter Crinian. Many of you probably have heard of Dr. Crinian, considered the father of environmental toxicology. He was literally doing this work with patients when I was hanging out at Berkeley High with my buddies in the 9th grade. So this guy's been around for a really long time. And that's not just that he's been doing this a long time, it's that he's incredibly intelligent and he reads the research and understands the science behind toxicology. So you ever see Dr. Crinian, Crinnion, Dr. Crinian giving a talk, you see his stuff on YouTube, jump on it because he's got really great and valuable information. If you want to get into more details that I'm going to cover tonight. The next doctor, I'm sure all of you know Dr. Pizzorno, literally the founder of naturopathic medicine in America. He literally founded Bastyr University, which is the Harvard of naturopathic medicine. And Pizzorno's still out there giving talks, still out there causing trouble, still out there teaching doctors. And what an amazing researcher and clinician he is as well, Dr. Joe Pizzorno. And then a man that I met for the first time this past year, this Canadian doctor. And I love the Canadians. They're always the nicest people in the world, and this is no exception. His name is Dr. Stephen Jenis, spelled like genius. So Dr. Jenis, Dr. Pizzorno, Dr. Crinian, these three folks I was, very privileged to sit in front of for many hours this year and listen to them speak about toxicology and what their decades and decades of experience uh, adds up to. And tonight I want to kind of summarize the things I learned from them. And again, if you want more information, you can look these folks up. And they all have information on YouTube and on the various websites. And the message of these doctors and the message that I see in my practice, I've only been in practice for 20, 25 years. So these men are very much senior to me. They've been around twice as long as I have. But what we're really seeing here, all of us, is a tragedy that's just unfolding right in front of our eyes. And what we're seeing is, a problem with environmental toxins. And one way that this manifests, which is annoying, unsightly, and motivates people to want to change, is with body fat. And so I want to talk tonight a lot about toxins, plants, how to get rid of body fat, why body fat accumulates so much these days in so many people when it didn't used to, and what are some of the things that we can do to address it. And the thing is, these are the kind of questions, like, and I wrote them down, just I'll read from my list here. When can you do a cleanse? When can you do a fast? When should you do intermittent fasting? When should blood sugar control be the most important thing? When do you have to eat animal products and protein to lose weight? When should you be plant-based to lose weight? What about dairy? And why is this such a problem? And then what are the different kinds of corrections that we have? Neurotransmitter related, mitochondrial related, blood sugar related, GI related, and then I think the most important probably is toxin related. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of stuff I want to cover, but I want to make this kind of like a big picture talk so you guys get the big picture, because it's hard to get the big picture. And I've been doing this work for 20, 30 years, really 30 years, before I even started my formal training. I was pretty deep into this with different programs. And I get to go around and listen to all these doctors talk. I get to teach doctors. I learn a lot of information every year. And I'll tell you, what I want to try to do tonight is summarize that and give you like the highlights, so it saves you a lot of time and energy in trying to figure this stuff out on your own. So I thought I would just start off with a description of what the heck we're talking about first. Oh wait, I'm supposed to start off here. I got a PowerPoint here. I'm supposed to introduce myself. But let me get around to this. In case you guys haven't been to one of these talks before, I'm Dr. Dan Kalish. How you doing? I've been in practice for a long time. I trained a bunch of doctors through the Kalish Institute. I was in a monastery. We can talk about that later, in the monk diet. And I'm really into these treatment models. But tonight I'm going to jump around in the PowerPoints. So we're not going to do this in a linear way. And I want to try to tell a story here that starts right here, okay? So, and it starts basically, the story starts with fatty acid metabolism. And that's a fancy way of saying how you burn fat, because that's the number one concern that people have. And it is amazing. I'll have a patient who's depressed, but they want to lose weight. I'll have patients who have autoimmune diseases, but they want to lose weight. You have patients who have anxiety, but they want to lose weight. Pretty much everyone that I work with rare exception, wants to lose weight. And there's a reason why we're so overweight now, and there's a reason why it's become so difficult to lose weight. It's not random. It's not some, emotional problem that you have in your head. There's a very real environmental toxicology reason why this is happening. I want to talk about that. So let's start off the talk, a little bit of physiology, but not too much, but you should understand these basics because this is important. It's your body. So what we're going to start talking about is fatty acid metabolism. And here you have a fat. You need to break that fat down. And what is the purpose of fat in the first place? We don't ever stop to think about it. We just think about all the negatives on fat, and not a lot of people just sit around and think about what's the purpose of fat? Why do we even have fat? Okay? What's really going on? And so the number one thing is, that I'm sorry, I hope my sound is working. Somebody sent me a little note that the sound's not working. Hopefully it is. Raise your hand if you can't hear me, okay? And I'll take a look at the sound. But raise your hand if you can hear me. How's that? Because if you can't really. It works fine? Okay, all right, good. So the thing that's we really want to focus on is fat and the purpose of fat. So fat is an energy storage system. Fat is why we couldn't live for half a second without fat. Fat also forms the phospholipid bilayer around every cell in your body. Fat is super, super, super important. And the burning of fat for energy is an absolutely essential component of remaining alive. And so it's not a bad thing. I'm going to read you a little description about fat and what it does here that I saved. So fatty acid metabolism, again, that's the burning of fat, consists of catabolic processes that generate energy. That means you're breaking down the fat to make energy. And anabolic processes, that's building up processes that create biologically critical molecules. That could be hormones, ketone bodies, triglycerides, phospholipids. Okay, so you have to have fat in order for all these things to function, and you have to be able to burn fat. And what fats do is they capture energy in the form of ATP, and then they release it, right? I'm sorry, they capture fats are stored energy, and then it's released when the fat is burned and turned into ATP, which is what we're trying to see here in the mitochondria. Okay, so this is how you take fat. Use this nutrient called carnitine to turn it into acetyl-CoA, and then acetyl-CoA enters into what's called the citric acid cycle, go through all these biochemical steps, and at the end of this long process, it is a rather long process, let's make this big so you can see, we generate the thing with the big red letters, ATP, or energy. So if you can burn fat, you will have energy. If you can burn fat, you won't have very much body fat, and you will have a lot of energy. And what is everybody's main complaint? I'm tired all the time. In other words, they can't make energy, and I'm overweight. In other words, they can't burn fat. So I just want to point out that these are two problems that are on the exact same identical biochemical pathway. Okay, there's no difference between saying I'm fat and I'm tired. It's the fat that you're storing in your body that you're not converting into energy, which is making you tired and overweight all at the same time. So this process is important to understand. And the quick summary of the talk, if you just want to listen for 2 minutes and get off the talk right now, I'll just tell you what the basic summary of the talk is that if you can only see me on the screen, just minimize the camera and you can maximize the PowerPoint slides. So you have control over that on your screen, all right? The gist of today's story is that if your mitochondria and your citric acid cycle are damaged, you're going to not be able to burn fat, and you're going to gain body fat, and you're going to be tired. That's sort of the take-home message here. And what we're seeing now, and this is really disturbing to all the doctors that I know well, and this is what I'm talking about with Dr. Stephen Jennis and Dr. Joe Pizzorno and Dr. Crinian, these people that have been around for decade after decade, is this is a really critical problem, and it's getting a lot worse year by year. And the data and the research shows this, and the clinicians all see this in our practices as well. So there's a problem happening, and one of the ways that it's manifesting is in the inability to burn body fat. Okay, and that bigger problem has nothing to do with the human body directly. It has to do instead with our exposure to environmental toxins and what those toxins are doing. So let's take a look here. 80,000 plus chemicals have been released into the environments, hundreds of pesticides, right? And this is one of the more frightening ones. Newborn babies have somewhere between 50 and 70 toxins from the time they're born. Okay, we have, incalculable, you can't even really imagine what 1 billion pounds of something is, right? You can barely imagine what, 1 million pounds of something is. But there's so many of these chemicals in the environment, and there's so much of this junk in the air that our bodies now, all of us listening to this call, are completely saturated with hundreds and hundreds of toxins. And they estimate the typical adult, the average adult in the United States, anywhere, depending on what you read, from minimum of 220 to maximum of 700 potential environmental toxins in your tissues right now. And many of these toxins are water soluble, which is great because if you drink a lot of water, you can flush out water-soluble toxins, assuming that you eliminate your exposure. But the really dangerous ones are fat-soluble, and they get into your fat tissue, and then bad things start to happen. So that's what I want to talk about. Now, the thing here is that, you know, we don't, as human beings, anticipate unknowns very well. We just deal with what's right in front of us. So, for example, I don't have a lot of patients that come to me and say, I'm really worried about having a heart attack. I'm only 35 years old. What could I do to make myself heart attack proof? Or, I don't have a lot of patients coming that say, oh, you know what? I have a strong family history of cancer. I'm only 40 now. I'm totally healthy, but I just want to make sure that I never get cancer. What could I do? We don't have a lot of patients come in that say, oh, I'm at risk factor. I have a risk factor for getting diabetes, but I really like to prevent it. It's probably 10 years away. What can I do? That never happens. It's really rare. People come in and they say, I'm fat right now. I want to try to deal with it. But in order to remove body fat, what we're all learning in my field now, all the doctors are learning is we have to handle environmental toxin burden in the body or you're not going to burn the fat off. We'll talk about the reasons why that happens. And so the problem is that the solution really, I should say, is that, it may be that you want to lose body weight or body fat, but in order to do that, you have to get these toxins out of the system. That also is going to reduce your risk factors for heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. It's going to make you bulletproof and healthy if you can get these toxins out. It will, of course, also have the side effect of helping you burn off body fat. But I'm more interested in this from the health perspective than I am from the losing weight perspective. So there are many toxins, herbicides, pesticides, heavy metals. Our major source for most people when we analyze this carefully is airborne exposure. So you want to make sure as much as possible that you're breathing clear air. Probably can't control the air outside your home, but you can control the air inside your home. Buy a decent air filter and make sure that at least for the time when you're inside your house, you're breathing clean air. And there's other obvious things that you can do in terms of trying to get rid of the environmental toxins exposure. And I think you guys are already pretty well aware of that, right? Like you eat organic food, you don't do a lot of chemicals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So now on the like what happens when this toxin gets into my body scenario, there's a bunch of things, and I want to show you the different levels of devastation that toxins can cause. So again, you take a deep breath of air. Let's use me an example. I ride my bike down from my home in the Oakland Hills to my office a couple times a week. I'm riding my bike back up the hill, and a diesel truck or a diesel car passes me and spews a bunch of fumes. I take a deep breath in, can almost feel and see your antioxidant levels going away, and the toxins entering into your lungs, your bloodstream, and eventually, of course, they're going to get into your brain. So let's look at the brain-related version of this first, and then we can cover some of the other issues as well. So the chemical toxin, the heavy metal, enters into your body. It eventually gets into your bloodstream, gets into your brain. Now, the really dangerous form of these toxins are the ones that are lipophilic or fat-loving, right? They're able to penetrate right through fat tissue. And so your brain has a beautiful protective system, and the design team didn't spare any expense, and your brain is protected with, and the brain cells themselves are also protected with layers of fat. But fat-soluble toxins get right through the fatty tissue that's protecting your brain and get into the neurons themselves, the brain cells themselves, and they physically hit the neuron. If you've ever seen, they have electron microscopic pictures of this and movies of this actually you can watch, and you'll see there's a little brain cell sitting there pretty innocently, and then the mercury molecule, or whatever it is, just comes up and just attacks it. It's like a great white shark chewing the leg off a 3-year-old kid. It's just like, there's no contest here, right? That mercury molecule just decimates the brain cell. The first time I saw that happening, I was like, whoa, that's pretty graphic. That's a little scary. And it's as disturbing as watching a young child get chewed up by a shark, because this is your brain tissue. Okay, it's not getting damaged or bruised. These brain cells are being mangled. It's like if you watch a horror movie and then somebody gets, cut by a chainsaw in half or something. It's like that, but it's your brain cell. Okay, it's not like a little nudge or I'm a little pesticide, I'm going to annoy your brain. No, it's killing the brain cell, right? Like a human being could be killed by an animal or a chainsaw or something like that. It's not a pretty thing. So the neuron gets hit by the neurotoxin, okay, and a certain number of the neurons are damaged and completely destroyed. They're dead. They're gone. They're not going to function anymore. Other neurons just sustain some damage. And you imagine, I don't know, if you ever see one of the Star Wars movies or Star Trek, and there's always like a spaceship that's the good spaceship that the good guys are on, and then they always have shields, and so when the shields are up, the bad spaceship guys can shoot photon torpedoes at you all day long and they just bounce off. But then there's always like a critical moment in the movie where the engineer guy looks up with a Scottish or Irish accent and says, "Oh, Captain, our shields are going down," and you know that this is not good because now the torpedoes are getting in. So the brain has protective mechanisms to try to prevent these neurotoxins from causing damage. Some of the toxins get in, kill brain cells. Other toxins get in and damage brain cells, just like a starship that's taken a few photon torpedoes, but it's still cruising. It hasn't completely blown up yet. Not everyone's dead. So when that happens, and there's salvageable brain cells in a sense, there's damage to these reuptake ports. They start to close. There's a buildup of various chemicals outside the cell, and the end result is that you end up with a poor functioning neuron without a lot of neurotransmitter substrate, not a lot of chemicals in your brain to make all this work. So one of the effects of chemical toxins that are neurotoxins is disruption of your brain itself. And what does that cause? Depression, anxiety, fatigue, neurodegenerative diseases, your memory problems. Could be as extreme as like my grandmother who completely lost her memory, diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It could be something like Parkinson's disease. Chemicals and heavy metals are going to damage brain tissue. In young children, if they get exposed too early in life, it can lead to problems like autism or developmental disabilities. So this is a really big, pressing issue that's affecting our culture all across the board. Okay, one of the other effects, okay, that's the bad stuff, but let's talk about fat because that's what we're talking about tonight. One of the really interesting effects that I find fascinating is when the dopamine and sometimes the serotonin-related neuron systems are damaged, people get really hungry. Isn't that strange? It's just the way that your brain works. Dopamine and serotonin control our appetite centers, and when we have a large toxin exposure and a lot of damage to brain cells, people get ravenous. They just want to keep eating, and it's not a normal kind of hunger. They'll eat a perfectly healthy meal with all kinds of vegetables and good food, and then they'll still want more food. Okay, so you can get a lot of weight-related issues from the neurotoxin-related problem because when these brain cells are damaged, your appetite becomes excessive and uncontrollable, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so that's one way it can affect you. We're just looking at all the different ways. Here's another common way. And these are all the different hormone pathways. So you can see for men and women both, we have pregnenolone and cortisol and DHEA. Okay, those are really important stress-related hormones. And then we have the sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Some of these toxins are called endocrine disruptors, which means that they get into and disrupt the endocrine or hormonal system. And some of them are called xenoestrogens. There's a variety of different chemical compounds that do this, but they mimic the effects of these various hormones and cause complete havoc within this very delicately balanced hormonal system. So what does that cause? All kinds of things like bloating and fluid retention, increased risk of various forms of cancer, as well as, especially if cortisol is disturbed, in response to this whole hormonal cascade of badness, weight gain, because when cortisol levels go up due to all this kind of chemical exposure, people are going to start to store body fat because their metabolism is going to slow down. So you can have neurological effects, you can have endocrine effects. Those are two different ways that it can affect you. And then I want to show you a third way, which is here. So these structures here are called mitochondria. And mitochondria are pretty interesting. It's worth, if you just like really have nothing better to do and you're tired of reading the news or weather report, just Google mitochondria and read about mitochondria because they're pretty fascinating. So let me blow this up so you can see it bigger. Okay, hang on a second. I always really enjoyed physiology, even when I was 19, 20 years old. When I was in college, I went to this funny college in Ohio called Antioch, but the really cool kids were all in the science department, and I figured out pretty quickly that the best field trips were the science kids, And so I started taking science classes, which I really enjoyed, and I hung out in the science department. I didn't get a bachelor's in science, but I spent most of my time dealing with hanging out with the science people. I took a lot of human physiology classes and a lot of biology classes and stuff like that. And they would do the best trips. Like we would drive from Ohio down to Florida with all these canoes and go around in the Gulf of Florida. And anyways, we had a lot of fun. Doing this kind of stuff. So I've always really been interested in science, and mitochondria you should read about. Okay, these are structures that are in your body, and these are this is actually the ground zero for the burning up of fat. So within this mitochondria, in a healthy one, all this stuff going on. Okay, the short version is fat's coming in here. It's going through all this stuff they call the electron transport, blah, blah, blah. I showed you a picture of this earlier. We'll look at it again in a little bit. And as a process, as a side effect of all this, think about it, it's like a fire that's burning fat. And there's little sparks that pop off, just like they would pop off in a regular fire. And those sparks that pop off are called free radicals. Okay, they're unbound electrons. And they're potentially dangerous. And you can see here, it says relatively few free radicals attack cell. So when you're burning fat under normal circumstances, you got a few of these free radicals. It's not a big deal. You have antioxidants. They put the free radicals out. It's like somebody putting the sparks out in a fire, so nothing bad happens. And what's happening with a healthy mitochondria? Abundant ATP. You have abundant energy, tons of energy, and not much of the bad stuff happening. That's a normal, healthy mitochondria. That's what's supposed to be happening. Now, one of the effects, and this could be in some ways one of the main effects of environmental toxins. All right, it's bad that they mess up your brain cells because it's really nice to have a brain that works. I like my brain. I would hate for it to start to not work. It's bad enough that environmental toxins can mimic hormones in your body and completely screw up your hormones and your sex drive and make it so you can't have a baby or don't want to have sex or all that kind of stuff. That's pretty bad too. Okay, so now we've lost our brain function, we've lost our sex hormones, stress hormones, but to lose your mitochondria is like extra, triple, quadruple bad because now you don't have cellular energy. And cellular, it would be like, what's the best example? It would be like, well, let's talk about cars. So it would be like if I had my car, my 1971 Alpha, which is a beautiful car. You can't see the whole thing there. It's a lot, and that car had been delivered to me perfectly intact with the best paint job in the world and no engine. It would be pretty close to useless without an engine. You could just let it sit in your garage and look at it, but it's not going to go anywhere. The mitochondria are literally the engines of the body. Okay, they're creating this energy which fuels everything. It fuels detoxification, it fuels the brain, it fuels the heart, it fuels the muscle tissue. ATP has to be present or you're going to just be, it's like unplugging, it's like having a lamp in your room and unplugging it, and now the lamp's not working, okay? This is a really, really important process. So free radical damage increases due to oxidative stress from environmental toxins, and the ATP supply shrinks. So what's going to happen if you have less ATP? You're going to have more body fat because you're not taking that fat and turning it into energy anymore. So you're going to be tired and overweight. And then what do these free radicals do? Well, this is where things get from bad to extra triple bad. So now you're depressed, anxious, and overeating because your brain's not working that great. Your sex drive is not very good because your sex hormones have taken a hit from all these environmental toxins. And then the free radicals are just going to finish it off because free radicals are the basis for the three major killers in America: diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. The more free radical damage you have, the more DNA damage you have, the higher risk of cancer you have. The more free radical damage you have, the more risk you have for damage to the arteries, and coronary arteries, etc. You have a heart attack, or arteries and blood vessels in the head, you could have a stroke. And what's directly relevant to today's talk, besides the fact, so now you're depressed, anxious, overeating, have no sex drive, you're getting cancer and heart disease. And it's to finish it all off, I saved the best for last, is the mitochondria, or the free radical damage, is going to block your ability to burn fat, and it's going to block your body's ability to process insulin properly. So that's going to put you at higher risk for diabetes, and it's going to cause an increase in body fat. So these environmental toxins cause physical tissue damage that's very real, that makes it so that no matter what you're eating, if you're on a 500 calorie a day diet or whatever it is you're doing, you're going to have trouble burning body fat because your metabolism has gotten incredibly, incredibly sluggish. It's not working properly. All right? So this is super, super important. Now, let's talk for a moment about things you can do about this. I mean, the obvious thing is you try to avoid environmental toxins, and I've talked about that before. I want to show you a little bit more on the detail of the way that you can analyze this from a more, I don't know what you would say, a more, I don't know, scientific basis maybe. So here's a picture of your liver and the nutrients that go into being able to protect your system against these environmental toxins. So we have phase 1 and phase 2. I interview on a regular basis every week the most famous, most intelligent doctors throughout the entire United States for my training program. And I just did an interview today with this woman, Dr. Fitzgerald, one of the brightest people you could imagine. And on a routine basis, the best and the brightest, after decades of study and really understanding everything that's on this slide here and all these pathways, come back to the same fundamental principles, which is that you have to, as a baseline, start to correct these imbalances with food. And in the case of water-soluble toxins, by hydrating. Okay, so you're not going to take enough niacin to solve this whole thing. And you're not going to be able to just take a whole bunch of glycine and make this go away. I'm not against supplements. I use a lot of supplements in my practice, but there has to be a foundation of doing this with food. Okay, and so what are the nutrients that are required? The B vitamins, the sulfur-containing amino acids, and antioxidants. This is the strongest argument anywhere for eating vegetables and fruit. And potatoes and grains and beans. Okay, these nutrients are going to be found in vegetables and fruit, and potatoes, grains, and beans. You have to have those in your diet. If you're grain intolerant and you're gluten intolerant, of course there's exceptions, but in general, you have to get these nutrients from food as a baseline, because the supplements as we've got them developed today are not as good as the nutrients coming from food. We're not able to yet. We don't have the scientific understanding yet to develop nutrients in a pill that are as effective as what you can get from your food. Okay, so you can protect your liver by eating the right kinds of plants, basically. And we should be eating a lot of these plants, like a lot, like every meal. If you're not eating vegetables or fruit with every meal, you might just give up. You might as well just give up. And if you're not drinking enough water, just give up. And you're not going to be able to supplement or, bail your way out of a situation like that. So the diet is the absolute kind of core concept to this. And then, of course, I do a lot of lab testing in my practice, and we can show you some tests in a minute where we also want to, correct for these things using antioxidant formulas and supplements and B vitamins and all that kind of stuff. But everything that I do that's supplement based is based on labs. Okay, so let's go just a quick review. We have environmental toxins that we're exposed to all the time. One area they damage consistently is the brain, hence the increase in depression, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, neurodegenerative diseases in general, autism in children. It is very clear to anyone who's paying attention that chemicals and heavy metals are absolutely devastating the human brain at a rate which is so frightening that it's incredible. You don't have to look too far around to see that that's a problem. Okay, second area that can be totally devastated would be your hormonal system, your sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, and the stress hormones like cortisol and DHEA will be negatively impacted or disrupted by these endocrine disrupting chemical compounds. Okay, so we've got neurological damage, we've got endocrine damage, and then we've got the one that's sort of, either of which, by the way, remember the brain damage can cause you to eat too much, make you fat. The endocrine disruption can cause your blood sugar to be unstable so you don't burn fat. And then the third category of toxin exposure that's going to make people overweight is when the mitochondria are damaged so you can't burn fat inside the cells anymore effectively. And when we do these tests, and I'll show you some labs, I mean, you'd be amazed it's a miracle any of us are alive today when you really start to look at this stuff. It really is. A little, what do you call it, demoralizing. So in terms of starting to correct things, number one you can do, doesn't cost anything except for investing a couple $100 in a water filter, is start to hydrate. And for most of the patients that I work with, I'll say the first thing I want you to do is immediately just double your water intake for a week, and let's just see what the heck happens. Because everybody always says, "Oh, I drink plenty of water," but most of us don't. So immediately I just ask people to drink at least 4 quarts of water, at least a gallon of water a day, double their water intake for a week, and let's just flush out the water-soluble stuff to get started with. So if you're looking for a cheap, easy solution, you don't want to spend a lot of money, get a good water filter and start to drink plenty of water. Now, don't overhydrate. Okay, don't drink enough water that you get hyponatremia and start passing out or something, but stay really well hydrated and make sure that you're flushing out all these water-soluble toxins. Then the next thing is to obviously avoid new toxins coming in. Air filter I mentioned. You can also do things like start to buy healthier food. And then the most important thing to get these wheels spinning here and to get the mitochondria protected. So remember, back to our Star Trek, Star Wars analogy, is we have a shield around us here. There's this big shield that protects fat burning. And that shield is made up of antioxidants. So it's a beautiful system. The design team really outdid themselves. Antioxidants exist where? In plants. So why do they exist in plants? Well, where are plants? What are plants doing? Plants don't go to parties. Plants don't stay out late. Plants are outside all the time. And so when the sun is up, plants are being exposed to the ionizing radiation of the sun. So in order to survive, because plants can't go inside during the day and protect themselves, plants have developed pigments which are themselves antioxidants. So these antioxidants, the plant grows to protect itself from the ionizing radiation of the sun. Blueberries are purple. Broccoli is green. What you're seeing in the term of, human beings see in terms of color, you're actually seeing these pigments, and the pigments are the actual antioxidants themselves. So a bright red bell pepper is full of that kind of antioxidant. A deep purple blueberry is full of that kind of antioxidant. And so these antioxidants exist in plants in very high concentrations. They're in extraordinarily high concentrations in spices and herbs. If you look at the numbers, they call it an ORAC value. It's like how much of an antioxidant is in this given food. Something like cinnamon just tops the chart. It's just incredible. Turmeric, cumin, and herbs, like anything that you would use as an herb, like oregano or basil or thyme, super high levels of antioxidants in those kinds of plant compounds. So all we have to do is ingest the plant, the spice, the herb, the vegetable, or the fruit, and that antioxidant system, which that plant grew for itself, is absorbed into our tissues, and we use that antioxidant as the shield to protect your mitochondria. It's as simple as it is. So if you're not eating plants every meal, every day, every year, your antioxidant shield's going to be weak, and the little photon torpedoes are going to get in and destroy your fat burning capacity. So that's just basically what's happening. So now, then the next question that comes up, and this is something that I struggle with every day with every patient, is okay, we know that the diet primarily has to be plant-based in order to get the antioxidants so that we can protect ourselves. It's even more important that we do this now than it was 100, 200, 300 years ago. Why? Because environmental toxins are at a level that is almost incomprehensible right now. And so, whereas it may have been important to eat your spinach and vegetables 100 years ago, now it's literally a matter of life or death. People are dying, by the tens of millions in the United States because they're not eating enough plants. Just look at the heart attack rates, cancer rates, diabetes rates, right? These diseases are deadly, and they're happening primarily because people aren't eating enough plants and because we're exposed to so many environmental toxins. Now, I don't think it's realistic for all of us, this coming weekend to eliminate all environmental toxins from our cities, our homes, and right, it's just not going to happen. So we have to try to, in the short term, solve these problems by eating more plants. In the long term, obviously, we want to advocate for a chemical-free world where we're not poisoning ourselves anymore. Um, either we're going to figure that out or we're going to cease to exist. I'm not sure which one's going to happen first, but we have to, at some point, do this more on a policy level and, political and economic level. But for the time being, you can, start the healing process with yourself by getting sufficient plants in your diet. And then there's certain plants that are better than others. They're cruciferous. There's certain plants that you should have every day. And there's some really basic ones. You got to eat these every day. I eat these with every meal almost. Green leafy vegetables, Swiss chard, kale, collard greens, anything that's got a deep dark green to it. You can cook them. You can have them raw. You can have salads, etc. But the green leafy veggies, I usually eat them cooked almost all the time because I don't like salads that much. I have salads once in a while, but I have the cooked greens with almost every meal. And then every day you also want to have cruciferous vegetables. That's going to be your broccoli, your cauliflower, your cabbage. Okay, the cruciferous vegetables have really powerful detoxifying effects, and then the green leafy vegetables do as well. And then you can add into that, and should add into that, if you tolerate it well, all the different kinds of fruit that you enjoy. Okay, trying to get a wide variety of antioxidants. And if you don't have a million different foods you enjoy, that's fine too. You can just eat Swiss chard and arugula every day and some broccoli and cabbage every day and be okay too. So you don't have to go crazy on every kind of food or vegetable, but you want to make sure that you're having them with every meal or this is not going to work. Then you're also going to, when you eat that many vegetables or you're having beans and potatoes in your diet, you're going to have a lot of soluble and insoluble fiber, and that fiber is a binding agent that's going to bind up toxins and pull them out of your body. Okay, so you should be having 2, 3, 4 bowel movements a day. If you're eating plants with every meal, that's what's going to start to happen. And again, you don't want these toxins to be, let me show you here in this diagram. You don't want these toxins circulating in your tissues. You want your liver to be able to break them down and get rid of them, but an important final step in getting rid of a toxin is your liver runs phase 1 and then phase 2 to break that toxin down to excrete it. But then it's got to come out either in your urine, in your sweat, or in your stool. So your urine, you're hydrated, that's coming out that way. If you're not having 1, 2, 3, 4 bowel movements a day, you're in serious trouble. And what's going to happen is those toxins that you did bind up and dump out in the stool are going to get reabsorbed. Okay, and they call that autotoxicity, meaning you broke the toxin down, you tried to get rid of it, because you're constipated, it didn't come out in the stool, and you reabsorb the toxin and it just circulates back and causes problems again. Okay, so having regular bowel movements is important, but that's going to happen if you're eating primarily plant-based. Then the really big question that comes up, once you have to include the plants. There's no negotiating on that, and that has to be, if it's a choice between a grass-fed steak and some broccoli, and for some reason you're in some altered universe where you can only eat one of those things, don't eat the steak, eat the broccoli. Now, most of the time we have choice, so you can eat more than one food at a time, but you absolutely have to do the vegetables. And what I do, or used to do in earlier years before I brainwashed myself into eating vegetables with every meal, is I would always make sure that I ate my vegetables first. This is a trick that worked really well for me. I called it my cereal bowl diet. Those of you who've been following me for like a long time, you remember this. It's this phase I had about 10 or 15 years ago. So anyways, I have a bunch of cereal bowls. I still have them in my kitchen. You look at the cereal bowl, it's just like a regular cereal bowl, but I never put cereal in it. And every time that I was going to eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner, I required of myself to fill that cereal bowl with vegetables and eat the whole thing first. That way, if I was scrounging around and I'm running late for, some meeting somewhere and I'm hungry and it's lunch, instead of grabbing that quick, easy to eat piece of chicken or making a peanut butter sandwich on gluten-free bread or something like that, I had to eat my vegetables first. Back in those days, I would make sure that I had at least one raw bowl of vegetables, that's basically a salad, and 2 bowls of vegetables that were cooked. Okay? You got to get the veggies in first. If you don't do that, you're not going to eat them. You got to fill your stomach with the veggies. If you wait until the end of your meal, your stomach may be so full that you don't want to eat the veggies. You got to eat the veggies first. Don't eat a meal until you eat your veggies. If you don't have any veggies, then don't eat. Go shopping, buy some veggies, and come back, and you'll never make that mistake again. So that's one golden rule I had. Can't eat anything until I eat my bowl of vegetables. You start to implement that, you'll eat vegetables with every meal. Because, you may miss a day or two of food, and then you realize, wow, I was really hungry yesterday. I didn't eat because I didn't have any vegetables. I'm going to go shopping at the farmer's market and buy some vegetables. Okay. So you got to start with that. Now, assuming that you have mastered the art of eating vegetables or fruit or both with every meal, then the big question that comes up with everybody, especially in terms of weight loss, is what am I going to do with starchy carbs and what am I going to do with animal protein? And, I've been interviewing so many doctors in the last few years, and you cannot get anybody to agree on what's really happening here. Okay? So the number one thing to think about is that there's basically, I would say, these two extremes. There's plant-based, and then there's going to be animal-based diets. So in either case, we're assuming that you have enough. Let me pull this other slide up. In either case, we're assuming that you have enough of the various nutrients that you need. Here we go. In either case, we're assuming that you have enough of the various nutrients that you need coming from vegetables already. And then we're wondering, okay, what are the extra foods that we're going to add into on top of this? And this is not a substitute for vegetables. There's no negotiation on the vegetables and fruit, because if you don't have the antioxidants, there's no point in even eating the meal. Okay, a meal without antioxidants, but think about it this way. This is a scary thought. If you eat a meal without antioxidants, what's going to happen? You're going to have, I don't know, say you have bacon and eggs, but no vegetables or no fruit. You're going to have energy that you produce. You're going to make a ton of ATP, but you're going to release all these free radicals. If you don't have the antioxidants, just the digestive process alone will generate free radicals that in turn will damage your mitochondria. Let me say that again. Just the digestion of meat alone will generate free radicals that are going to damage your mitochondria. If you don't have the vegetables to balance things out, then eating meat and dairy and eggs by themselves is actually dangerous and going to damage your fat burning. Now, the problem with this is that in the short term, if you cut out starchy carbs and eat a ton of meat, almost everybody drops a bunch of weight really quickly, because carbohydrate encourages your body to hold on to fluid. So you're going to lose a whole bunch of weight based on fluid loss. Sometimes people can lose 5 pounds. Sometimes they can lose 30 pounds just from cutting out carbs. But if you don't have sufficient vegetables and fruit in the diet, you're not going to have enough antioxidants to protect against the free radicals. And eventually, all that energy you're making from animal products is going to generate a ton of free radicals, damage your mitochondria, and eventually those kind of diets are going to start to make you gain weight. So you cannot get away with leaving out the vegetable part. All right, so now we're into a question of, we've got that part down. Now, what are we going to do in terms of animal protein or not? And what are we going to do in terms of how much starchy carb or not? So I have a theory on this, and in the functional medicine community, the doctors that I hang out with and work with all these decades, the amazing thing is that it's kind of like I've grown up. It's like I used to be in my early years at the kid table. When my first seminar I went to with Dr. Timmons, he flew in 12 of his close friends and colleagues down to San Diego. I still remember this. This is like 25 years ago, probably. And he invited me to go to this thing, and I was so excited. I was literally, I'm not exaggerating, the guy that was taking the coffee orders. So like all these senior doctors are in this room. They're doing this informal seminar, and they're like, okay, who wants what? And I'm like, oh, I'll go get the coffee. I went, I got the coffee, I come back, and I just sat down and shut up. And each one of these doctors, over the course of this 3-day weekend, gave various talks to the other doctors in the room. And that was my initiation and my first sort of exposure to these amazing minds, Now I actually get to go to conferences and I get to sit at the grown-up table. Instead of being the guy that brings coffee, I get to go to the speaker dinners and sit next to all the famous doctors and talk to them. So there's a lot of work and thought I've put into this. And in the functional medicine community, there's, in general, in my lineage and the people that train me, a very strong bias in favor of eating animal protein, in favor of eating various kinds of meat. And I think the main reason for that is because many of the patients that we attract in functional medicine are really quite sick, and they need the animal protein for cellular repair, and they need fat for hormone production in various processes. So, and many of these patients that we work with in functional medicine practices cannot tolerate carbohydrate. They eat gluten, it makes them sick. They eat rice, it makes them sick. They eat oats, it makes them sick. They can't eat carbohydrate, so that doesn't leave them a lot of choice. In some of these cases, they're even very limited in the vegetables that they tolerate because their gut is so damaged, they have so many allergies and so many reactions to food that they're very limited. So for decades now, I go back 20 years. My teacher, if you think of Timmons, I met him 25 years ago. He'd been in practice for 25 years. So this goes back well over 50 years, probably to the 1960s, 1970s, these various lineages of doctors that have impacted me. And what we've seen really consistently is that the more sick and the more damaged the gut lining is and the more toxic the person is, the more that they need to have some animal protein in their diet or they just can't function. And I have a large number of patients where they have to eat animal protein and have some animal fat, or they literally wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. So there's a bias within functional medicine towards being pro-animal protein. However, there is an equally smart and amazing group of doctors who do these plant-based diets. Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Campbell, Dr. McDougall, Dr. Greger. I've interviewed several of them. I've read many of their books, listened to their videos. I've been studying plant-based nutrition basically probably since like 1980, 1981. When I was 16 years old, I was reading these books about plant-based nutrition. So I've been involved in that area for a long time as well. And I think one of the things you find with the plant-based people is that they really feel strongly that animal protein and animal fat is going to cause damage to arteries. It's going to cause increase your risk factors for diseases like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, and there's tens of thousands of research studies and thousands of research studies coming out every single year that show that plant-based diets make a really big impact. However, it depends on how you've become sick and what systems in your body are damaged. Not everybody in my practice can adopt a plant-based diet. For some people, that would make them even more sick, in which case they need to use animal protein and animal fat and have a very limited amount of starchy carb. The general trend that I see with patients is that as they get healthier and healthier, they need less and less animal protein and animal fat because they don't have as much repair going on. And so as people get healthier and healthier, they can incorporate more and more grains, more and more beans, more and more potatoes, and start to move away gradually from the animal products, which can trigger some of these problems that we're talking about. And then in some of the very healthy individuals that I work with, they can adopt a completely plant-based diet and have no animal meat, no animal products, no animal fat, no eggs, no dairy products whatsoever, and be incredibly healthy, have all kinds of ATP, and clearly lose weight because when you're eating a completely plant-based diet, you're going to get full on your meals with relatively fewer calories than you are if you're eating more of like a paleo or a blood sugar control diet that has dairy and meat in it. Okay? So ultimately, we try to move people towards higher and higher plant-based diets. For some people, they can go to be completely plant-based, and then the big variable there is how much animal protein and how much animal fat do you need to be healthy. And there's very consistent patterns and there's very consistent mistakes that I see 100% of people make. 100% of people, when they learn about the benefits of protein and they learn about how carbohydrates cause fluid retention, start to become scared of carbohydrate, think carbohydrate is bad, and think that the more animal protein they consume, the better. So there's a very strong tendency for all of us to overeat animal protein. So you have to really kind of keep that in check and figure out what's the smallest amount of animal protein that's going to work and what's the smallest amount of animal fat that's going to work. And we had a discussion with a group of doctors on Tuesday of this week about this, and we're going back and forth, and I'm like, well, McDougall says 0 animal fat, no oils. Some of these doctors say no nuts, no seeds, no avocados, 0 fat whatsoever. Now, if you just survived a massive heart attack and you're lucky enough to be alive, you probably would want to do a no-fat diet. But barring the fact that your life is on the line if you eat oils and fats, most of us, I would say, agree that some amount of fat is really essential in the diet. And we came up with and I thought this was kind of like a middle of the road position, with one group of doctors saying, let's do the bulletproof coffee, let's do the coconut oil, let's eat the bacon. The other group saying 0 oils of any kind, 0 animal fat. I would say as a minimum, we have to have at least around 2 tablespoons of fat per day. Okay, and that could be 2 tablespoons of olive oil. That could be, in an avocado or in some walnuts or seeds or something like that. But you'd be shocked how what a small amount of fat the human body needs to run properly. So when we hear fat is good for us, when I first learned about raw butter and raw dairy, I'm not exaggerating, I started eating a cube of butter every day. And when I first learned about the benefits of animal fat, I started eating bacon every morning. So it's very, very easy to overdo it with animal fat and animal products, and just to simply get too many calories and to not get enough antioxidants, because those foods are very dense and very filling, and you're not going to need enough vegetables, and you're not going to eat enough of the fruit and beans and potatoes and those kinds of food that have the fiber and antioxidants and nutrients that you need if you're eating that much animal product. Okay, so it's up to each one of us, and this is a tricky thing to do, to try to figure out what's the right balance of plants. And you got to start your meal with a cereal bowl, right? You got to have the vegetables and fruit, first thing with every meal, and then how much carbohydrate and how much animal protein and animal fat you're going to combine into there. Okay, but the trend that I would say also is that as you get healthier and healthier, you're probably going to need less protein and less animal fat, even if you're exercising a lot and doing that kind of stuff. All right, so I'm going to show you one lab test and we're going to wrap up. So I'm a really strong proponent of the lab testing. I think it's pretty amazing that you can measure all these things. So when we look at, I'll show you what we're actually measuring here. And this will start to get a little more familiar since I show these slides over and over again. So here's your ATP production. Remember, this is the essential, this is like the motor in the car. So we're looking at, can you burn fat? Can you burn carbohydrate? Can you make energy? And each one of these boxes here is something that you can test for on a lab. And each one of these boxes is a list of the completely critical cofactors that allow your body to make energy. So I'll show you the lab test. You can actually measure each one of these things very effectively. And then similarly, here's a blow-up of fat burning itself. The main nutrient is called carnitine. You can measure carnitine levels and whether you have enough carnitine to burn body fat or not. And if you don't, then you can obviously take some carnitine. You can measure oxidative stress and see what your free radical levels are. That in and of itself is just such an outstanding concept. It's even hard to conceptualize that you can do that. And on the same lab, and this is an organic acids profile, I run these on every new patient. On an organic acids profile, you can measure the brain chemicals that we talked about, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, the epinephrine. On these same lab tests, you can measure serotonin levels. Now, it's not a direct measurement of the chemical, it's a measurement of the urinary byproduct. But it's a very effective way to look at what's happening. So when you look at the test, I'll just show you real quick here because we're running out of time. Here are the different things that you can measure on an organic acids profile. Again, I've been doing these on every new patient for quite a few years now, and I've become the master of organic acids. I'm really passionate about this. Here's your fat burning metabolism. Do you have enough carnitine? If not, you need it, you'll burn fat. Here's your carbohydrate metabolism. Do you have the nutrients you need to metabolize carbohydrate or not? Here's your energy production cycle. They map it all out, and you can see where the dysfunctions are. On the same test, B vitamins, methylation can be measured. I mean, talk about methylation all day long now, and you can actually measure whether you're methylating properly or not. That's huge. And then, again, just for the sake of your brain, you can measure dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine here and see if the levels are normal or not. You can measure whether you have a lot of oxidative stress, which is going to do what? Damage your mitochondria, mess up your fat burning, right? And you can measure the various detoxification pathways, all within organic acids profile. So you can do the lifestyle changes. That's the most essential part. You can do the lab testing if you really want to get into the functional medicine work. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm available if you want to do some consultations. You can go to Kalish Wellness and check it out and do a consultation, get a bunch of labs done, and figure out if you have these problems or not. Okay, this is a really important era in our history right now, I feel like, where this is, I'm going to end on, I hate to end on a down note, but I just want to try to be realistic with you all. You know, when I interview doctors, the same thing always happens. We always, the doctor and I that I'm interviewing get on the phone, or the webinar maybe 10 minutes before they do their presentation. So we always have this 10 minutes, every week where I'm talking to some important doctor kind of off the record, right? The tape's not running. I'm like, hey, Ben, hey, Allison, hey, Mary, what's going on? What's the latest? And the kind of thing that doctors talk about when patients aren't around and when students aren't around is the very sad fact that what we're seeing now, it's almost like an experiment that's happening on a global level of who are the people that are going to react poorly to environmental toxins first and what's going to happen to them. And I'm trying to outline these things right now for you. Those people are going to have neurological damage and overeat and have neurological diseases. They're going to have mitochondrial damage and not be able to burn fat and get overweight and be really tired. They're going to have damage to the liver and the detox systems that are run by the liver. They're going to have problems with insulin and be at risk for diabetes. They're going to have damage to their DNA and so on and so on. And so the people that we work with now in functional medicine practices are those people who are highly susceptible to toxin-related illnesses. Some of us aren't so susceptible and can have high toxin exposure, and our genetics help protect us. But for many of us, we're in a high risk factor, and it can be a really big problem. Okay, so anyways, do the dietary changes. If you want to find a functional medicine doctor, work with someone like me, start to take some action steps if you're having trouble, because most of this stuff is solvable, especially if you catch it early enough. All right, and I'm going to end the talk for today, and we'll be doing more of these as the year goes on. I'm trying to be much more in the public eye now and communicate more with folks on a regular basis. So we'll send out some emails when we have our next presentation together. Okay, bye for now.